people think that it's not psychology that's driving them. It's like, oh, this is my perspective, or I'm bad with money, or I'm da, 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 da.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. Like, I'm bad at money. I've just never been good at money. And you're like, well, no, that's not a real thing. It's money's just a skilled thing that you can learn about and read about. But I'm interested with my clients and self. Why?
That's Andrea McTagg, and this is Zac Erickson, host of The Shift Show, and I am pleased to welcome you to the very first episode of the relaunched Shift Show. We've been doing The Shift Show for a couple of years now, and a while back we decided, wouldn't it be awesome if we could relaunch the show, give it a nice fresh coat of paint, and moving forward be able to provide episodes to listeners on an ongoing basis. And so today is the very first episode of that endeavor. What you're going to be hearing on the Shift Show moving forward is a combination of some of our favorite episodes from the past couple of years that we've done the show, as well as new episodes that we've recorded multiple already, and we're all really excited about releasing these. This really represents a whole new take on the show, so we're really excited about that. Today, we are going to be starting off with actually one of our favorite episodes. This episode is all about money and how you can use money to actually contradict that mindset of like, oh, well, money can't buy happiness. Well, it turns out that there are certain things, it's not necessarily going to make you happy entirely, but there are some principles to keep in mind that might increase your chances of having it cheer you up a little or increase your quality of life. So this is an episode with Andrea McTagg and I. As the resident audio person as well, I will say that these older episodes may have a slightly different sound quality than the newer ones. Bear with that. The content is still amazing. It's not so bad you're not going to be able to listen to it, obviously, but you may notice. But these are, just think of it that they're like from the archives of 2 years ago or whatever. But, it's pre-COVID, so I guess that makes it like, it might as well be the Stone Age at this point. Thank you everybody for listening. You guys are wonderful, and if you want to check us out, go to shiftpsych.com. That is where you will find all of our episodes that we have released. And as we are relaunching this podcast, absolutely do us a huge favor and head over to wherever you're getting your podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. Do us a favor and give us a review. Even if you can give a short review, like written review, that's even better. Just let us know that this is stuff that you want more of. We're really excited to hear from you. And thank you so much for listening. And we will, without further ado, start the episode.
You're listening to The Shift Show, where we use psychological insight to unravel the craziness of life for you. You growth mindset person, you. Tune in every other Thursday to hear some wacky psychologists demystify what exactly is happening in that weird organ that lives inside your skull. And for this especially delicious podcast experience, we can thank our friends at Shift Psych, the people who deliver a results-driven and innovative approach in therapy land. Throughout the podcast, we'll throw down some serious psych gems, but these are certainly not a replacement for treatment by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So please seek one out if you need help.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Shift Show. My name is Zac Erickson, and joining me today is Andrea McTagg. What's going on, Andrea?
Not much, Zach. How are things with you?
Pretty good. It's Friday, right? It's been a crazy week, but it's been good. I'm excited. We got a cool topic we're going to talk about today. We're talking about money.
Everyone thinks about that a lot.
And I think part of what we were talking about before the show is just sort of approaching these episodes where it's just me and you. It's just sort of like, we're just relaxing. We're going to just chat about things. We have a lot of conversations just sort of around the office, and we're like, you know what, this is good. Just sort of just chat. And so
and it's kind of like the psychology of every day. So it's whatever we see a lot in session, or what we're experiencing, or maybe recent research that we've kind of been chewing on.
Yeah, for
Stuff
sure.
like that.
Yeah, and I'm excited because today we're going to be talking about a study, which is, you know what, I should probably at least be able to reference who these people are, right?
It was a study from Purdue University.
There we go.
Yeah, and it was basically looking at, I guess, consumerism and money.
Yeah.
So how do we spend things, or what makes us happiest? Because I guess it goes back to that age-old question, right? Can money buy you happiness?
Yeah. So here, I want to ask you a question to start this off. If you were to, I don't know if you do the lottery. It's always funny because like the people who I feel maybe would know what to do with the lottery, like a lot of those, like also don't gamble, right?
Yeah.
Or at least don't do the lottery. I have
no.
to actually buy lottery tickets to get the
Yes.
win the lottery.
I do not buy lottery tickets.
But if you did and you won, what would you do?
Oh, this is a great question. I really, really love what we do with Shift, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably just use it on
Just
the business,
dump
it in the business, and just go hard.
Yeah.
And expand, and because it's fun. We get to think about ways to improve people's lives, and I think it's actually in this study that is one of the ways of using money to actually bring yourself happiness is in service of others. So I guess that's the majority of it.
Yeah.
And then I'd buy a sick house with a pool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. Like that's kind of how I feel. Just buy, take care of the essentials and just, invest what you need to into, making that sustainable or whatever. And then just doing doing things that make you happy and enjoy. Because one of the things that's interesting in this study one of the big takeaways that I had was that feeling of, and we're going to get into it, but a lot of people go and they just spend their money, like you hear all the time about people who win the lottery and spending it all, and then they don't feel any better. And
actually 15% of lottery winners actually in the US anyways actually end up declaring bankruptcy. So it's quite interesting. Our relationship with money as humans is very complex. I think it's one other thing that caused us, I guess the original reason why this came up as a topic is because we were starting to see, and we were talking about this a little bit in the staff room, Zac and I, and we were starting to see a little bit of this phenomenon that's happening with dual income families where they're working more and working harder and working more and working harder and putting that money in the bank and buying the bigger SUV and the bigger house. And we are seeing these declining rates of happiness, lots of anxiety, lots of depression. And so you're looking at these people and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't actually enriching you. So why the hamster wheel? Like what's going on here? Is there a problem with how the money's being spent, which is what we're going to talk about today? Or is it a problem of why are we trying to get so much?
Yeah.
So kind of looking at that and looking at that dual income family structure, which is the norm now in Canada and the US. Not to mention the single parent households, which is different kind of struggle there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I definitely have seen multiple people who, multiple clients who come in and they're like, I've basically achieved everything that I want to achieve and not any happier. Right?
Yeah.
And this is a question of, not necessarily I guess for, if you are in a situation where you have money to spend, or just, even if regardless of how big that pot of money is, right, at the end of the rainbow or whatever you want to call it, or even if it's just sort of, within your budget, what are some ways to use the resources that you have in order to improve your life and to actually improve your sense of well-being and happiness.
Yeah, I think
it's
actually looking at what is the cost of everything. And when you say cost, not only the monetary cost, what is the cost to your happiness? What is the cost to your parenting and the quality of those relationships with your children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think we look at money or we look at consumer goods very directly. We're like, okay, this thing costs $159 and an hour of my time to go get from Canadian Tire or wherever. However, there tends to be much larger costs. How much of your time do you have to output to acquire that money? How much time does that thing that you're buying take away from your family time or your time with friends? How much time does that take away from you if that item was acquired not with money but with debt? So we start looking at these like bigger cost pieces, and even things like the amount of space that you need to pay to store crap, because it's a weird industry, but the storage industry in the US and Canada is huge. Because people acquire shit that they literally don't have room for, don't want to see, but don't want to give up. And so then they're paying for that room to store it. So we've got tons of costing around consumer goods. And we wanted to kind of look into it a little bit. Some of my clients and I definitely to investigate, like, why am I doing this? Like what should I be spending on? And what is too much of a cost to spend on. Like, what's just silliness?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. So this study came up with basically 8 different things, or 8 different suggestions or principles, I guess is what they say, around how to, what are good ways to spend your money in ways to help you increase your happiness. So, the first one, do we just go through these one by one?
We can go through them, or we can go through them with some examples as well. And I think, why don't we sum it up a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
Basically, it kind of comes into how you shop as one detractor from happiness. So they talked a little bit about comparison shopping.
Yeah.
So, having too many options, it gets overwhelming, and then you're sitting there scrolling through reviews of different vacuum cleaners or whatever, and it takes that satisfaction value out. So I think there's that. And then there's also the purchasing of things like extended insurances and warranties, which also is just kind of spending for fluff for nothing that you're going to see concretely. And you're spending for the likelihood of fear.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think that it's worthwhile to even think about like the emotional side of why we buy certain things. I have a really funny story actually. When I was doing my master's in neuroscience, I was writing my thesis. I would do anything that I could to not write my thesis, right? And there was like a Walmart that was nearby, and I would sometimes I don't even know why, but I just found myself wandering around. And by the end of the time that I had my thesis done, in my office, I had an entire shelf full of like $8 to $15 little trinkets and like Transformers and like
silly things,
a little Ghostbusters Lego car and like all these things that I'd gone into Walmart or somewhere and wandered around, and that's cool. And it ended up on my shelf, and it was like, wow, like I had this whole box of stuff as I was leaving. I was like, I don't want any of this stuff. Why do I even have this?
Well, the answer to why you have that, we know a little bit, right? We know that shopping releases that same hit of dopamine that binging on carbs does, or having a couple too many drinks does. It's that little lift. And I think often what I was seeing with my clients that have a lot of consumer spending, they need that little hit because they're missing satisfiers in other areas of their lives.
Yeah.
So if and that's kind of also the reason where we see like I said, a lot of binge eating or those kind of the Scotch after work kind of things, where they're just these little things, and sometimes it does get into bigger out of hand spending, but they're little things where you're just buying it because you're like, I need to feel good.
Yeah.
I need to feel good. And so when you were kind of stressed out, I'm guessing when you're writing your thesis and maybe a little bored, you're like, I don't want to be doing this. You need that little hit of like, give me something that'll make me feel good. So those types of purchases they're short-lived. Right? It's just like eating that cheeseburger. You're like, oh, that was good. And then you're like, well, now my bank account's got, it's not satisfying in the long haul. And I think that that's essentially one of the things that was highlighted in the Purdue study, was that the consumer goods very, very rarely actually bring you happiness long term, unless they're involved in an experience. So say you're an outdoors person. I'm so not, but I'm going to use this example anyway. So not. But say you're an outdoors person and you buy a travel trailer for your family, and then you use it every weekend, and you're out there camping and you're enjoying, and it's part of the tools to have an experience or an adventure. That's going to have lasting happiness for several reasons. One, because you're going to be predicting like, oh, next weekend we're going out again, pack the marshmallows, you get excited. Then when you're in the moment, and then after, we replay experiences back after. So experiences last a lot longer in our memories than just that one time. So it's not a one-off thing, but you don't replay or relive that cheeseburger, or you don't replay or relive, the little figurine and the little dopamine hit from that mini transformer that you bought. You're just like, I bought that, done with that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I think in general, and this is kind of a blanket statement, but experiences affect our happiness way more. Yeah. And the other thing that we've found that's quite tied to happiness is what the value of the thing is that you've purchased outside of money. So I'm very weird about money. I'm like a very frugal, strict with my money. And so every year, at the end of the year, when we get our year end for the business and I know what I'm making, I go out and I've had a thing in my head that entire year that if I hit this goal, that I'm getting this thing. And it's always like something completely ridiculous. One year it was like this like ungodly expensive spiky ball chandelier that looks like a star exploding. And one year it was a hot tub. And for a while that will have a little bit more meaning because it'll be something that I earned. And you're like, haha, this. And then it's kind of like the trophy, right?
Yeah.
You get trophies when you're a little kid and you have this like shiny
No, I
gold.
never got trophies.
You didn't get no trophies. No trophies.
I was the kid. You forget, I was the kid in baseball who was filling his hat full of grass.
Someone send Zac a trophy, please. We have to have something with the trophy. Okay, I used to do competitive dance, so I'd have this trophy, and it's like a little stick of gold, shiny plastic. But you're like, yeah, that's my trophy. So proud of it. More proud of it than things that I'd really wanted or these other consumer goods. So we can assign goods meaning through how we had to earn them.
Yeah.
But it's still not as good statistically as the experience piece. And the experience piece isn't even the way that people get happiest from money at all. There's another piece to it. And again, it was referenced in the study there. And it is when we use our money, well, there's two things. When we use our money to service or help others, so when we give back, when we create, when we do something for someone else, that's because it's a higher order thinking. Dabrowski is kind of on that. Yeah. So an example of that, I guess, would be, taking the lottery money and putting it back into the business so that we can spread the word about psych or do more things like this or whatever. And then there's another one that's not cited in the Purdue study, but we're seeing it more and more and more with my clients. When you get really busy, and maybe this goes into the topic that we were discussing a little bit earlier, is when you have a dual income family with children, you have a lot of busy going on.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have kids, you've got a lot of busy going on. So at a certain point, if we start to use our money to buy time back, that will increase happiness because it decreases stress.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's hiring the cleaner or buying the, Sunterra meal or whatever.
Yeah.
Whichever way you end up doing it, then that's something that's going to free up a little stress. So that's what we're actually, I spend a lot of time coaching a lot of my couples that are stressed out. I'm like, well, what are you doing with the money? What would you really like? And very rarely does it start to go to a consumer good at that stress point. They're not like, oh, I'd really like a Lamborghini. No, they're really like, I want a day off.
Yeah.
I want to be able to go somewhere, or I want to just be able to not clean the house or whatever. So it's like, well, so buy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I was thinking of, well, first off, I like that sort of that idea that basically it's almost like an indirect experience, right? Like you're spending money in order to buy your time back. Yeah, I love that for sure.
Well, because it's not like, and it's kind of one thing that we've been talking about is the stress on the current family, the dual income family model.
Yeah.
It's like essentially like if you go back to the 1950s, you had like, one stay-at-home parent, often mom, and then dad working. So you had two jobs, and then they're split 50-50. Okay. Ish, in an ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But now we have job number one, mom at work, job number two, dad at work, job number three, raising kids, and dealing with the household. And that's not accounted for. So at some point, if you're going to make the extra money from job number one and job number two, you're going to have to buy some time back to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, kind of one of the things that I've noticed as well, with both my wife and I working, there's something about, one of the other ones in here, they just call it delay consumption, right? So like that often, even for experiences or for, even if there are like material things that you're purchasing, kind of like what you were saying, as far as like at the end of the year, right? The anticipation of spending your money on something that you enjoy often is actually like you get more out of that than actually doing it.
Yes, right? And you're also going to pick an item that is has more meaning for you, because you're not going to work all year for the little plastic transformer, but maybe you are going to work all year for that weird chandelier that you've been obsessing about from Finesse for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
You might do that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's also interesting because when we investigate costs, so one of the other yearly prizes for myself, my yearly prize draw, very prize focused, was about a hot tub. And I really hope my husband's not listening to this podcast, because I always tell him I love the hot tub. But what it actually is, it's actually a huge pain in the ass compared to how much it was, because it takes, it takes effort to maintain the thing.
Yeah.
Then you have to worry about it, and you're like, does it need a new fill? It's like a kind of weird kid that's in my backyard, and I never use it. Like I've been out probably once in the last 3 months. So it's just a money suck nonsense thing. And I think that's when I really realized I needed to be way more deliberate about what I was picking and what the cost would be later, because I don't want to own items that cause more stress, where you have to store them or carry them or service them or whatever. You want to be really, really careful about the things that you choose, really deliberate about how you're spending your money. And then what we ended up realizing from that is I really, really only want to spend my money on those experiences. So really cool trips. We went to Thailand last year.
There's nothing better than knowing a trip is coming up and like just anticipating that. Like I find that even if it's just something little, like right now, over the summer we're planning on going and visit. We're going into the mountains for about a week or so, and
Cool.
like just looking forward to that, and like the frustrations around the house or just sort of when things are building up, it's like, okay, there's something in the distance that I'm looking forward to that makes everything way easier to deal with.
A satisfier. And we can actually use these kinds of principles around happiness to inform even the type of trips that we take. So if you're doing the like, I'm just taking a break from my life type of trip, that is going to create less happiness than I'm going to have an adventure. I'm going to have an experience. We're going to go on this hike when we're in the mountains. We're going to eat at this particular restaurant, or we're going to try elk or whatever. Like putting more experiences into that trip will make the anticipatory value go up and the memory value. Like, do you remember that time when we made it to the top of that mountain when we looked out from that lookout and saw that lake, blah, blah, blah. So you're reliving things. And essentially that's it. You're like borrowing happiness from the past to relive things over and over. Yeah. Like we went, when we were in Thailand, we miraculously got, reservations at one of the top 10 restaurants in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very fun. It's called Gagan, and it was in Bangkok, and it was 24-course tasting menu. And it was actually quite funny because it was all little, they just give you a list of 24 emojis, and each dish was an emoji. And then you didn't get what the actual ingredients were until after. But, that's something that 5 years from now, I was like, do you remember that cool thing that we did when we were in Bangkok and we ate at that cool place? Because it's an immersive experience, right?
Yeah.
So that dinner was weirdly cheap. I think it was like $150 each. Strange. But anyway, but versus me buying some random dress that's in the back of my closet for $150 as well. So then you go like, okay, what's the value there, right? This thing I have to store in the back of the closet. I'm never going to use it again, blah, blah, blah. Versus that was really, really, really cool. So putting it into more of the experiential. And then also realizing that everything you buy and everything you do and everything you sign up for takes away from some of your goals. So I think when people, and this is what I've kind of found that families are encountering, they don't have really clear value sets outlined. So if you don't know what your value set, you don't know why you would want something or why you wouldn't want something.
Right.
So if I use the business as an example, we were approached the other day by a cannabis distributor that wants to pair up with a psychology clinic and da-da-da-da. And kind of a hustler type of character. And I know our value set. I know our core values. I know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And so no, it was a hard no quick. You're like, nope, that doesn't match up with our thing. Nothing wrong with cannabis. It was just this particular business. And so then you're like, no, this is the direction that we're going to go instead. And then we had the opportunity now to do a little charity in support of a little activity in support of one of the charities, Walk a Mile in Her Shoes for the YWCA. And we're like, that completely lines up with what our value set are. Yes. And then when your value set matches up with your spend, or whether it's an effort spend or a financial spend, it's easy. It's simple. So if people look at their families as little businesses and you go, okay, what are the core values for your business? What are the core values for your family? Then you can decide whether the hot tub is a stupid idea or whether it fits. Right? So we're kind of looking at it like that.
Absolutely.
It's a way we can streamline it and get that yes, no measurement. Because sometimes it gets hard, when you're looking at something and you're like, do I really need this? I really want this, but do I really need this? It's the answer to that question.
Exactly.
It helps
I can't remember what it was too. I was looking at something and just the idea of like, is it over a certain amount of money, then just sleep on it, right? Like those kinds of things too. I think that so often we think, oh, we need this, or we need, it's like, I had an experience. We had, there was one time that we needed this thing, and it would be awesome to have it, and then we're going to store it forever.
Oh right? Yeah, no, it's completely stupid. And I think like even I was at, I took my car into the shop the other day. So of course, they always give you the brand new loaner, so that you can get completely dead. And you're like, you know what, I might need this car. I don't need my old car. I need this car now. And then you're like, what the hell? And then you go across the value set. And my value set is to lead a more streamlined life where the things that I purchase this is after the hot tub, okay?
Yeah.
This is after the hot tub. The things that I purchase are either things or objects of beauty that I'm going to see every day and enjoy every day, or that relate to what I value. I'm not a car girl. I don't value cars at all. I drive a 1-minute commute both ways. Like I do not need a new car. And so the minute you start going against the family value set or your personal values, it's like, yeah, no. Okay, get that stupid thought. Of course, the new cars are nice and they smell all great.
Yeah.
But get that stupid thought out of your head, Andrea, was like where it went to.
Yeah.
Helps with decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the things in the study too was just that fact that when we buy something, we are very quick to habituate, right, to something new, that we're very quick to adapt to the new normal. And so that anticipation, again, that we're super excited about it, right? Like you can imagine like, oh man, the idea of having this car is really exciting. And then a day after you bought that car, that would have been the new normal and it wouldn't have been exciting anymore.
And it gets less and less exciting every day you own it then.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting one. I think there's another thing I think that people don't value when it comes to money is using money. Okay, so money has very, very many meanings for many people. But if you use money in a way that will align again with your values. So one of my personal values is freedom and not wanting to be, that's why I work for myself probably. It's wanting that piece of freedom and wanting the freedom to do the things that I think are cool or spend my time the way I want it. So you can use money and the way you handle money to create that, right? So if you focus less on, say, consumer spending, which is not in line with the value of freedom, because the more I spend or the more I get in debt, the less freedom I'm going to have. Right. Now, not everybody has to have the value of freedom. That's fine, but I do.
Yeah.
So that means I want to save more and invest more and use my money to create more passive sources of income so that I have higher freedom ratios, so that I can work less or I can work more, but on the things that I want to, like this podcast, so that it's not all tied up in the have to drudgery thing. Right. And I think that that's an important thing, especially for, like I said, those busy families to think about now, because we're going into this direction where we live in a heavily consumerist culture. And people are buying more and getting less and less happy. So it's like, well, maybe buy less, buy deliberately or buy experiences. But even more than that, maybe figure out whether you'd rather buy a value like freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of figuring out, again, lining all of that up. I think for me, one of the things that is, again, going back to what you're saying, is like that consumer debt that we see that nowadays it's much higher than it's ever been. And I think there are a lot of economic factors that, frankly, I'm unqualified to talk about, right?
But it was 110% in Alberta last year as the average consumer debt.
Yeah, right. And just thinking like how, I guess looking at how you, I have several clients, I guess, that are actually in that place where even the necessities sometimes I think are not being met, right? And that a lot of people end up going into that as well. Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on debt, like I have a lot of opinions on debt because I have a lot of opinions on money impacting psychological health negatively or positively, but mostly we see it negatively because, we tend to work with people that are having some problems with whatever if they're on your couch. So what I see is a lot of limiting beliefs. And we talked about what limiting beliefs are in our first episode. So there are negative thoughts about self or about the world that are really internalized early. And I see a lot of those limiting beliefs being the reason. So people's experience with money activates a lot of them. So I see a lot of things like I'm not good enough, I'm incapable, I'm at risk. And when we think about a topic, so if we're thinking about money and then that's what we're feeling, generally the result is avoidance. And anyone knows if you avoid money, it's not going to go well, right? Because that's when we have overspending, we have not sticking to budgets, we have debt collection, and then it kind of starts to snowball. And then I think, the feelings of being overwhelmed and how do I dig out of this? And again, it compounds into I'm incapable, I'm a failure, and it just becomes such a negative experience that it's not addressed directly. So one of the things I work with my clients on when it comes to the money topic is removing those limiting beliefs so that they can look at it and they can go after a budget and they can feel capable and they can feel powerful again. Because I think I'm powerless is a huge one, particularly if they haven't grown up in a home that has taught them about money. And we sure as shit know the school system's not really big on doing that. So if you don't grow up in a home where positive money behaviors were the norm, it's really hard to acquire that information.
Yeah, and even kind of to what you were saying too, one of the things that came up for me is just that idea that there have been times in my life that that I had a very specific budget, and it was basically stick to this budget or you don't eat. Like period,
Yeah.
period. Right?
Anyone who's been a student for a while,
right?
that one, I think.
And even just the idea that like looking at, I think that things like credit cards and things like that, speak to in a situation where for me I thought like, oh my gosh, I'm, that if something like I'm not capable or or things like that, like I'm not going to be able to live, I'm not going to be able to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
But having lived through that and not having a choice but figure it out,
Yeah.
I was able to do it and not go in, like I didn't have, debt wasn't a choice for me at that particular point.
Same.
And then later on it's like, oh man, I'm a poor student and I've got like this, cheapo credit card, whatever. Like suddenly the credit card's maxed out, and it's like, wait a minute. Like,
how did that happen?
How did that happen? Like there was no, like if that wasn't there, then I would have. And so it's almost more of like that, because this opportunity is there. Again, like you were saying, that avoidance. You don't want to deal with the situation, and so here's a way, a very short-term way to deal with that stress. And
I think that's one of the terrible things about debt being so readily available to people.
Yeah.
Because when you're in that pain point of like, I don't have any money for anything fun. I want to go on this weekend with my friends, but I'm a student and I don't have any money, blah, blah, blah. Oop, there's a little credit card. It's like, you could use me. You can pay me back. And it's like this evil little demon whisperer thing. Yeah. So I grew up in a couple of situations that really impacted my view on money and affected my psychology around it. Mm-hmm. So one of them was I grew up in a family of 2 immigrants. So I saw like a lot of hard work and a lot of, coupon cutting and penny pinching and no extravagant nonsense thing unless the money was in the bank kind of thing. So I saw a lot of like grit and grind. And you kind of go, okay, so that was in my norm sector. And then I had an experience earlier on when I was a student where I was like, it ended up being that I was very, very poor and had a serious lack of resources and had to just, like you said, kind of like hand to mouth it. And if you spend this $100, that's your grocery money for the next 2 weeks. So figure out how to make soup and you're not going shopping basically. And so in that phase, and I'm a fairly emotional person. So in that phase, I started to get really, really angry. I was like, fuck this. This is never happening again. I hate this. I hated the feeling of having to worry about everything. Like I remember I was parked outside my little shitty $300 a month apartment. And I came downstairs and it was downtown and I got a parking ticket. And it was like a $25 parking ticket. But I was like, no.
That's the worst.
No. Because it was enough to incite a level of panic where I'm like, how am I going to pay this? If like, that's literally like my money for the week now and crap. And so what I realized in that moment, once I got over the initial fuck moment, once I really got over that, what I realized in that moment was I never want to be beholden to this feeling again. I'm never going to be powerless against money again. So from the time I got my first job, because I was in university when that happened, from the time I got my first job, to fight that feeling, it was like, no, you're going to save, you're going to work a second job, you're going to da-da-da-da-da. So I became very, very focused on always having a cushion. Now, obviously, this was before I had done a lot of my therapy. So I also had a fairly big cognition that was driving that. So your cognitions can either interrupt your ability to be strong and good with money, or they can help it. So I had I'm at risk, like crazy. Like I'm at risk, I'm not in control. Those 2 cognitions were very primary for me in my early 20s. Yay, therapy though. Shameless plug for therapy again. And so what it caused me to do was really bear down and do the delayed gratification thing and bank some serious money. So I had this buffer that kind of ran. Now that can go a little out of hand where sometimes the buffer needs to be super huge and it's imaginary and you're not actually at risk, which is the other thing, which is the way that it went. And then, back into therapy to get it all regulated. So I think you have to be careful which way you're going, because you don't want to, and this would kind of be like my family's background is to save, never spend, never enjoy, which is its own dysfunction around money. Or you have the other side where it's like, oh, buy it now, debt it up, blah, 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 and drown. So you want to hit it like kind of in the middle where you're using money to buy those experiences or to help the people that you love or whatever, to have that immediate gratification, but you're also taking care of business and making sure that you're being responsible and like living within those budgets and meeting goals and not just, being completely willy-nilly. But I think that that's how the limiting beliefs can kind of work on either side to inform that attitude with money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because of the dysfunctional need thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
because otherwise again you find that point where you're reaching, and I think one of the things that's coming up for me too is just that idea that not everybody has that luxury of like, I think that some people really do find themselves in a situation where there just isn't enough money or things like that. And I think thinking of that's kind of where that's the breeding ground for some of these limiting beliefs too often, right? It was just that sort of like, it's not it. And I think for regardless of where you are, asking yourself, are you making these choices emotionally, or are they you being in alignment with your values?
Yeah, like, are we actually like working from a cognitive perspective? Because I could say very early in my early 20s, though I got myself out of that, super poor student mode, I was definitely making all my money decisions based on limiting beliefs and their associated dysfunctional needs. So you've got,
and there's still like, you're actually financially, maybe
fine.
even doing pretty well,
20
and
G's
you're
in
like,
the bank,
and you're like stressed out still.
Oh, just like
yeah,
exactly. Because if we have that dysfunctional need of I need to protect myself against like an imaginary phantom thing, it's like, no, you have $20,000 in the bank and you're 24 years old. You're fine. Like you're more than fine. The parking ticket situation is not happening again.
Yeah,
you're all good. You're saving your nice away for your little down payment one day or whatever. But the feeling of like being really paranoid about it, and then it comes into your behaviors, right? So it's like, oh, I can't go with my friends because I have to work an extra like 15 hours of a serving job on top of my full-time job because of blah, 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 blah. And so it ends up creating anxiety and a reality perspective shift that's not like, it's not normal. So you kind of want to make sure that whatever you're doing with money, whether it's going out and buying that extra thing that you don't have the money for and you don't need, but you need that little hit, and it's like the ignoring avoidant kind of money category, or the obsessing zoomed in money category, like looking at like what is my relationship with money, what am I doing? And the reason we circle back to that, the limiting beliefs, like when you're having your money perspective and the way you handle your money driven by those in either direction, it's not good, because that means that your value set, which lies in your cognitive mind, is not the thing making the decisions, right? So it's not the one that's like, hey, I'm going to work really hard and earn this trip for me and my family to the mountains, and we're going to go and enjoy all these cool things and because that's what I want to spend my time on, is building relationships with my kids. Like that would set, like, that to me looks like what your value set is really near.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it would be not doing that, and then you're like, okay, I gotta save for retirement because I'm gonna Zach's not that well, by the way.
We're never gonna go on vacation. We're never gonna, like. And I think that's just sort of figuring out like what is that, it's important to do those things, because a lot of times, you can imagine a future where it's just like, oh, well, we were just so stressed out, so worried, never did anything that was fun, or
they didn't get that chance to bond with you,
exactly,
maybe,
right? And
discover things.
And then later on,
regret.
Later on, you're like, oh, we should have done that, right?
Yeah, you're like, why didn't we? And I think that when we get that why, we're clearly acknowledging that we're just disjointed from our value set. Like, why did I, when my kids were little, why did I put all the money in the bank and just sit and stare at it instead of showing them what a mountain lake looks like? And we've got all these drivers, and I think a lot of times, people think that it's not psychology that's driving them. It's like, oh, this is my perspective, or I'm bad with money, or I'm da da da.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. Like, I'm bad at money. I've just never been good at money. And you're like, well, no, that's not a real thing. It's money's just a skilled thing that you can learn about and read about. But I'm interested with my clients and self. Why? Like, what's the why with the money? Because you go dig a little bit deeper. It's just like a diet, right? Like, oh, I have no willpower. Well, no, you have a perspective in your mind or a limiting belief that's popping around that's removing your ability to stick to a diet or removing your ability to stick to a budget. So we look at those, and then you can pull them out. Because once you figure out what money makes you feel like, then that's your answer. That's like the secret little question that I use in session. Yeah. Like, so when you think about money, do you go, I am not in control, or I am at risk, or I am stupid? Like, there's your limiter. Like, there, that becomes your perspective really quickly.
Yeah. and just kind of figuring out, okay, well, then from there, like, then what? Then you
Okay.
say, so like, let's say, for example, hypothetically, right? This has nothing to do with the fact that student loans are coming up, right? but like I am, like I'm not in control, maybe. Right?
Okay, I'm not in control.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
powerless, something
Sure.
like that. Because
something like that. Sure.
student loans will do that, right? Because you're like, I have these big things and I have to
Like,
do
how am I
something
gonna
about
meet-
that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, so we have the I'm powerless, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the dysfunctional need with that is I need to, well, let's do I'm not in control, because that's
Mhm.
probably a more common one.
Mhm.
So I'm not in control is the limiter. We
Yeah.
flip that to get the dysfunctional need. So I need to
Mhm.
control everything.
Yeah.
So maybe that means this will go two ways.
Mhm.
Maybe that means you being like super budget conscious and you're checking everything and clipping
Mhm.
every coupon and just kind of stressing out about it all the time and
Mhm.
checking the bank balance a little bit too much, or worrying like, can we afford that mountain vacation or can
Mhm.
we not? Da, 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 da.
Mhm.
It'll go in that stream, which creates like anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And it creates like checking behaviors and like a little bit of obsessive rumination thoughts. Or you meet the need. So you're like, okay, I've controlled everything. All the coupons
Mhm.
are clipped. I've done the thing. I
Yeah.
checked the sales. And then you do it again because
Mhm.
it's insatiable. So then you've got to do it
Yeah.
again and again and again and again.
Mhm.
And at the top of that, like big tower of meeting that need, say 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever, then you get your opt out where you're like, you know what? I don't even care. To hell with it. I'm just gonna.
Oh,
you
I
know
was
what?
gonna say I bounce between those two all the time. It's like, look at the budget and like as
On it.
as like look at it and I'm like, yes, we gotta, we're gonna, everything's lining up.
It's tight.
And then I don't want to look at that thing for like a
Yeah.
good month.
So we know,
Right.
and we know avoidance and procrastination.
Yeah.
Avoidance is a huge thing that comes as an opt-out behavior. So you're like, you know what, to hell with it, and then you ignore it for the month, and at the end of the month, you get love a credit card statement, and you're like,
Mhm.
what in the hoot and the why did?
Yeah.
How did that get to $4,000? Like
Yeah.
what are we doing? And that's what it is. It's all related to the same cognition. You're just looking at the opt-out at the top,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or you're looking at the obsessive drive to fulfill that dysfunctional need.
Mhm.
So the way we deal with that then is we're like, okay, and then you, like you said, you will go between both modes, right?
Mhm.
So you go between the opt out, because once you do the opt out, you're like, oh no, now I got to get back on the whole super
Yeah.
tight budgeting thing, and then
Yeah.
it just happens again. So what happens with that when we do that is you go back to the original and you go, okay, it's the feeling of not being in control.
Mhm.
So you go, okay, how can I address that feeling in myself? So not address it by doing something in the world,
Mhm.
but how do I address the feeling of not being in control in myself?
Mhm.
So that's when sometimes we do some therapy reprocessing. Sometimes you can just talk to somebody, a good friend, and you're like, how do you get a hold of this feeling and feel
Mhm.
capable with money? Or you can go one step further and go like, why do I feel like I'm not in control?
Mhm.
And I think sometimes identifying those factors and then addressing those factors in the world, that's kind of
Mhm.
the thing that will impact
Yeah.
change, right? So if I go back to like my 20s self, and feeling definitely not in control with regards to money, and I had that same cycling where I'd like blow it all on stupid things and then be like, oh no, save.
Yeah.
And then so I looked at like the feeling of not being in control. And I go, what would it take me to feel in control
Mhm.
and be reasonable? So then you hit a middle ground. So what I did was I was like, okay, I want to be able to buy a house. This is what I would like to save for a down payment. And this is what I would like to have as a savings goal. And this is what I would like to have for fun and trips and being able to enjoy my like
Mhm.
early 20s, right? So, and that was reasonable, because the two things in the opt out and then the other thing in the obsessive meet the dysfunctional need, they're both extremes, right?
Mhm.
So if you can use goal setting theory to come up with a plan in the middle,
Yeah.
that's when you're going to be
Mhm.
able to have some consistency. And it's that consistency that will allow you to meet the goals, but not have kind of a noose around your neck all the time,
Mhm.
feeling it's a little too tight. And then we can stick to it,
Mhm.
right? It's the same as that 80-20
absolutely,
rule
yeah.
with dieting, right?
Yeah.
If you're like, nope, I got to be on point, skinless chicken breast, steamed
Yeah.
broccoli every day,
Yeah.
what's going to happen on the weekend?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah, and I think for me too, like really it comes. I think for me, I'm kind of at the point where I'm kind of doing a lot of the things that you're saying, and really what happens is like there's still there's something that kind of just like pokes its head out and is like, oh, I'm not in control, or whatever it is, right? And at that point for me, I feel like I'm at the point where it's like, okay, yeah, no, I recognize that that's what's going on, and kind of keeping myself in check, I guess, with that.
yes,
but
being
again,
conscious.
being conscious of it and knowing again, making those decisions from that cognitive rational part of you.
Well, and I think once you realize that you're working on a limiting belief cycle or whatever,
Mhm.
you can step away from that and be like, that's not real. Because we can have fear, we can have different emotions. We don't have to act on them all the time, right? You're like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm doing that thing again where I feel like I'm not in control.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a bit extreme. And like I said, to get yourself in the middle, you can use a range of different cognitive tactics. You can use goal setting theory. Mentorship is a great one. If you're like, ooh, money just stresses me out, go talk to somebody that's better about it and then help them create a plan. And then again, back to that goal setting theory or, therapy. If you know that's because some people, it's so paralyzing that they can't get into the cognitive realm about it.
Yeah.
Or, just, basically sitting down and having an accountability meeting with yourself or maybe with yourself and your spouse every month. So you have that piece where like, even though I feel like I want to avoid it, I can't, because I said every first Monday of the month, we'll sit down and we'll go through our budgets and da. And that, despite it increasing your anxiety in that moment, it actually decreases it throughout the month because you're not just like ignoring this big thing that you really need to care about. Yeah. So there's lots of different strategies around money, and I think we'll probably end up talking on another podcast about it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a juicy topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's lots there. So that is I don't know. I mean, lots of stuff about money, and just I think that for me the big thing is really just kind of just checking your relationship with money. Like, what is your relationship with money? Is it a way to deal with stress? Is it a way, and just kind of asking yourself and saying like, okay, well, am I okay with that? Or like, where do I go from there?
I think the end thing would be like, are you acting in accordance with your personal values? Is that what money's doing for you in your life? And if it isn't, what does money make you feel like about yourself? And then that'll be your like little secret garden entry door to what you need to do with it. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of cool things.
Awesome. Well, hey, I think that is we've got to wrap up here, but that's been awesome.
It was nice chatting with you, Zach.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get it at least once a month, Zach and I.
Yeah. So I don't know. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
No, I was just going to say if any of the listeners have any thoughts about things that they might be doing in their life and they want to know kind of what the limiting beliefs or what the content behind that might be in a general topic, whether it's money or sex or parenting, shoot us a little note.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Shift Show. Be sure to check out our website, shiftpsych.com, for more great content to help you optimize your life. Follow us on social media at ShiftPsych, and let us know if you have ideas or things you'd really like to hear about on the podcast. If you found this useful or interesting, which you probably did since you're still here, please share and review the show. And make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This lets us know that you like what you hear so we can bring you more of it. The podcast was brought to you by ShiftPsych's results-driven mind trainers. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Shift Show.